Ethan woke up to a soft, unnatural hum filling his room. His first thought was that his alarm clock was acting up again, but as his eyes fluttered open, he realized something was very wrong. A strange, silvery glow illuminated his desk, and standing next to it was someone, or rather, something he'd never seen before. The figure was tall, almost 7 feet, with smooth, silver-toned skin that shimmered faintly in the dark. Large, violet eyes locked onto his, unblinking but strangely calm. Her hair, if it could be called that, flowed like strands of liquid metal down her back. Ethan froze in his bed, his heart racing. "Do not be afraid," the figure said softly. Her voice was melodic but clear, with an accent Ethan couldn't place. "I mean you no harm." Ethan blinked rapidly, unsure if he was dreaming. "What? Who? What are you doing in my room?" he stammered, his voice cracking. "I am Lyra," she said, stepping closer. Ethan instinctively pressed himself against the headboard, clutching his blanket as if it could shield him. "My father knew your father. I came here seeking refuge." The words barely registered. Ethan's mind reeled with questions. Was this some elaborate prank? A hallucination? Had he been abducted by aliens and didn't even realize it? But Lyra didn't seem threatening. Her gaze was steady, and her hands were raised slightly, palms open, as if to prove she wasn't carrying a weapon. "You've got the wrong person," Ethan said quickly. "I don't know anything about aliens. My dad is just some engineer." "Your father is more than you think," Lyra interrupted. "He worked with my father long ago, part of an alliance between our worlds. My father trusted him. And now, I must trust you." Ethan frowned, his heart still hammering. "Alliance? What alliance? My dad doesn't even like talking to the neighbors." Lyra tilted her head slightly, her expression unreadable. "He was once part of a coalition that sought peace among distant civilizations. I am here because I have nowhere else to go. My people are in danger, and those hunting me have already reached your planet." Ethan stared at her, dumbfounded. "Wait, he said, holding up a hand. "Back up a second. You're saying my dad is friends with your alien dad, and now someone's hunting you. This sounds like a bad sci-fi movie." Lyra didn't laugh or smile. Instead, she pulled a small disc-like device from her belt. It hummed faintly as it lit up, projecting a glowing blue screen filled with symbols and diagrams Ethan couldn't understand. "This device identifies genetic compatibility," Lyra explained. "It proves I can trust you. I need your help, Ethan." Ethan's jaw dropped. "Okay, now I know I'm dreaming." But Lyra wasn't done. She pressed a button on the device, and a beam of light scanned Ethan from head to toe. He flinched, but it didn't hurt, just felt like standing under a heat lamp. A moment later, the device beeped, and Lyra nodded to herself. "You're the one," she said simply. "The one what?" Ethan demanded, exasperated. "The one who can help me," Lyra replied, as if it were obvious. She tucked the device away and sat down on the chair by his desk, her movements fluid and graceful. "You are your father's son. That is enough." Ethan rubbed his face, trying to make sense of the situation. "Okay, let's say I believe you for a second. What exactly are you running from? And why come to me?" Lyra hesitated for the first time. Her gaze shifted to the window, where the faint glow of streetlights filtered through the curtains. "My people are being hunted by a faction that seeks to control our abilities. My father, he tried to resist, but they betrayed him. He sent me away to find your father, knowing he would keep me safe." Ethan frowned. "And you thought sneaking into my room in the middle of the night was the best way to start this conversation?" "I had no other choice," Lyra said, her tone quiet. "They are close. I could not risk being seen." Ethan sighed, running a hand through his messy hair. "Okay, fine. Let's say I believe you. What am I supposed to do about it? I'm just a high school kid. I don't know anything about aliens or galactic wars or whatever this is." "You have something far more important than knowledge," Lyra said, standing up. Her violet eyes met his, unwavering. "You have courage. That is all I need for now." Before Ethan could respond, there was a faint rustling outside the window. Lyra's expression darkened, and she moved to the shadows with surprising speed. "They're here," she whispered. Ethan's stomach dropped. "Who's here?" "The ones hunting me," Lyra said. She turned to him, her voice steady but urgent. "Do you trust me, Ethan?" Ethan hesitated, his heart pounding. Finally, he nodded. "I guess I don't have much of a choice." Lyra gave him a small, almost imperceptible smile. "Then we must leave. Now." And just like that, Ethan's quiet, ordinary life was turned upside down. Ethan couldn't shake the cold fear twisting in his gut as he and Lyra hurried down the stairs. It was barely dawn, and the house was eerily quiet. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like an alarm in his ears. "Where are we going?" he whispered, his voice tight. "To your father," Lyra replied calmly. She moved like a shadow, her silvery skin shimmering faintly in the dim light. "He will know what to do." Ethan's dad was in the kitchen, nursing a cup of coffee like he did every morning. His graying hair was messy, and his glasses sat crooked on his nose. At first glance, he looked like nothing more than a tired middle-aged man. But when he glanced up and saw Lyra standing beside Ethan, his eyes widened. "No," he breathed, setting his mug down with a trembling hand. "It can't be." "It's me, Mr. Carter," Lyra said softly. "I'm Lyra, daughter of Andar." Ethan's dad leaned back in his chair, his face pale. "Andar. I haven't heard that name in years. What are you doing here?" "They're hunting me," Lyra said, her voice firm. "My father trusted you. He said you would help." Ethan stood frozen, looking between the two of them. "Okay, can someone explain what's going on? What does she mean? Her father trusted you. Since when are you buddies with aliens?" Mr. Carter sighed heavily and ran a hand through his hair. "Ethan, sit down. This isn't going to be easy to explain." "Yeah, no kidding," Ethan muttered, pulling out a chair. His dad took a deep breath. "A long time ago, before you were born, I worked on a classified project for the government. They called it the Gateway Initiative. It was supposed to be a way to explore deep space using experimental technology. But it was more than that. The project wasn't just about sending humans out there. It was about making contact with what was already out there." Ethan blinked, struggling to process the words. "You mean aliens. You knew about aliens this whole time." Mr. Carter nodded. "Not just knew about them. We worked with them. Andar, Lyra's father, was one of our first allies. He was part of a coalition of advanced civilizations trying to prevent conflict across the galaxy. They called themselves the Concord. I was assigned as a liaison to help establish peaceful relations. And you never told me?" Ethan asked, his voice rising. "I couldn't," his dad said, his tone apologetic. "It was classified. And after the project ended, I thought I'd left it all behind." Lyra stepped forward. "The Concord is in danger. A faction called the Dominion is hunting us, trying to take control of our resources and abilities. They're ruthless, and my father was one of the first to stand against them. He sent me here because he trusted you." Mr. Carter shook his head slowly. "Andar always believed in humanity's potential. He said we had something no other species could replicate: our creativity, our unpredictability. But I'm just one man, Lyra. I don't have the resources or the power to stop the Dominion." Lyra's expression didn't waver. "You have your son." Ethan nearly choked. "What does that mean?" "I'm just a kid. I don't know anything about aliens or secret coalitions." "You have something far more valuable than knowledge," Lyra said, her violet eyes fixed on him. "You have courage. And right now, that's what we need." Before Ethan could argue, a loud crash echoed from outside. The three of them froze. "They found us," Lyra said quietly. Mr. Carter shot to his feet. "Ethan, get the bag from the hall closet. Now." "What bag?" Ethan asked, panic creeping into his voice. "You'll know it when you see it," his dad snapped. "Go." Ethan bolted for the closet and yanked the door open. Sure enough, there was a black duffel bag sitting on the floor. He hauled it out, nearly falling over from the unexpected weight, and dragged it back to the kitchen. His dad unzipped the bag to reveal a collection of strange-looking devices and weapons. Some of them looked vaguely human-made, but others were clearly alien. "You had a stash of alien tech just lying around?" Ethan asked, incredulous. "Emergency protocols," his dad said, pulling out a sleek, metallic device that glowed faintly. He handed it to Lyra. "This will help you stay hidden. Activate it if they get too close." Ethan stared at the bag, then at his dad. "What's the plan? Are we just going to run?" "We don't have a choice," his dad said grimly. "The Dominion doesn't negotiate. If they found us, they'll stop at nothing to take Lyra, or kill her." Lyra placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder, her touch cool and steady. "I'm sorry for dragging you into this," she said, "but you're stronger than you think." Ethan swallowed hard, his mind racing. This wasn't how he'd imagined his life going. Fighting off alien hunters with his dad, and some extraterrestrial girl. But as crazy as it all sounded, he couldn't just abandon her. "All right," he said, his voice trembling but determined. "Let's do this." The crash outside grew louder, followed by the unmistakable hum of something mechanical. "Time to move," Mr. Carter said, grabbing the bag and slinging it over his shoulder. "Stay close, both of you." As they slipped out the back door and into the shadows, Ethan couldn't help but wonder if he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life, or the most important decision he'd ever make. The night air was cold, but Ethan barely noticed it over the sound of his pounding heart. His dad led the way, the heavy duffel bag slung over his shoulder. Lyra moved silently, her sharp eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of danger. Ethan stumbled along behind them, trying not to trip over tree roots as they cut through the wooded area behind their house. "Where are we even going?" Ethan whispered, glancing nervously over his shoulder. "To a safe house," his dad replied in a low voice. "It's not far, but we have to stay off the main roads. The Dominion might already have people watching." Ethan shivered at the mention of the Dominion. He didn't know much about them yet, but from the way Lyra and his dad spoke, they sounded like a galactic nightmare. A faint hum echoed through the air, sending a chill down Ethan's spine. Lyra stopped abruptly, holding up a hand. "They're close," she said, her voice barely audible. "What do you mean, close?" Ethan asked, his throat dry. "Drones," Lyra whispered. She pointed toward the treetops, where faint red lights flickered through the branches. "They're scanning the area." Ethan's dad muttered a curse under his breath and dropped the duffel bag to the ground. He unzipped it quickly, pulling out a small device that looked like a flashlight crossed with a remote control. "Stay still," he said, flipping a switch. The device emitted a low-frequency hum, and the air around them shimmered briefly. Lyra nodded approvingly. "A cloaking field," she said. "Smart." Ethan stared at his dad. "You're telling me you've had alien gadgets this whole time, and I'm only now finding out about it." "Not the time, Ethan," his dad replied, his tone sharp. "Move. The cloaking field won't last forever." They continued through the woods, the hum of the drones growing louder. Ethan's chest tightened as one of the red lights dipped lower, sweeping across the trees like a searchlight. He ducked instinctively, but Lyra grabbed his arm. "Stay calm," she whispered. "Sudden movements will draw attention." Ethan forced himself to breathe slowly, his heart thudding painfully in his chest. The drone passed overhead, its red light just missing their hiding spot. "Keep moving," his dad urged, his voice barely above a whisper. After what felt like an eternity, the hum of the drones faded into the distance. Ethan let out a shaky breath, his legs feeling like jelly. "That was way too close," he muttered. "It's not over yet," Lyra said, her tone grim. "The drones are just scouts. The real threat will be on the ground." Ethan glanced at her, dread curling in his stomach. You mean actual soldiers? Lyra nodded. The Dominion doesn't rely on machines alone. Their soldiers are highly trained and relentless. Great, Ethan said, his voice tinged with sarcasm, because this wasn't terrifying enough already. Despite the fear gnawing at him, Ethan couldn't help but notice how calm Lyra was. She moved with a quiet confidence, her violet eyes sharp and focused. He wondered how someone so young, she didn't look much older than him, could handle this kind of danger without panicking. They reached a small clearing where a dirt path cut through the trees. Ethan's dad stopped and motioned for them to stay low. Just up ahead, he said, pointing to a dark shape in the distance. It looked like an old, run-down cabin, the kind you'd see in a horror movie. That's the safe house, Ethan asked skeptically. It's not as bad as it looks, his dad replied. The important stuff is underground. They made their way to the cabin, the wooden planks creaking under their feet as they stepped inside. The air smelled like dust and mildew, but it felt safer than the open woods. Ethan's dad moved quickly, pulling aside an old rug to reveal a trapdoor. He yanked it open, revealing a set of narrow stairs leading into darkness. Down here, he said, waving them in. Ethan hesitated, peering into the pitch-black stairwell. You sure there aren't any rats down there? His dad rolled his eyes. Rats are the least of your problems right now. Move. Lyra stepped past Ethan and descended the stairs without hesitation. Ethan swallowed hard and followed, gripping the rickety handrail. The air grew cooler as they went deeper, and dim lights flickered on, illuminating a small underground room filled with equipment. The room looked like a mix between a bunker and a tech lab. Monitors lined the walls, displaying streams of alien text Ethan couldn't read. Strange devices hummed quietly, their purposes a mystery. This place is something, Ethan said, looking around. It's a relic from my old days with the Gateway Initiative, his dad explained. I set it up as a fallback in case things ever went south. Lyra inspected the monitors, her expression unreadable. This will do for now, she said, but we can't stay here long. They'll find us eventually. Ethan's dad nodded. Agreed. But first, we need to figure out our next move. As they settled into the bunker, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. He wasn't sure what terrified him more, the idea of being hunted by alien soldiers or the realization that he might actually have to fight back. Either way, there was no turning back now. Ethan sat on a cold metal stool in the underground bunker, his mind spinning as he tried to process everything. Alien soldiers, cloaking fields, secret alliances. This was all straight out of a sci-fi movie, but it was happening to him. He looked over at Lyra, who was inspecting one of the strange devices on the wall with calm precision. How are you so calm? He asked, his voice tinged with frustration. Aren't you scared? Lyra glanced at him, her violet eyes steady. Fear doesn't help in situations like this. It clouds your judgment. My father taught me to focus on what I can control. Ethan let out a humorless laugh. Yeah, well, I don't think I've got that skill yet. His dad interrupted, his voice serious as he leaned over the main console. Ethan, focus. We need to talk about what's next. What's next? Ethan repeated, incredulous. I don't even understand what's happening now. Mr. Carter sighed, rubbing his temples. I know this is overwhelming, but we don't have time to ease you into it. The Dominion isn't going to stop until they find Lyra, and if they realize she's here, Earth could become their next target. Ethan's stomach twisted. So what do? We need to get her off the planet, his dad said. Lyra straightened, her expression sharp. That won't be easy. The Dominion likely has patrols monitoring any major transport hubs. If we try to leave through conventional means, they'll find us. Mr. Carter nodded. That's why we're not using conventional means. There's an old gateway prototype I worked on during my time with the initiative. It's not far from here, but it hasn't been used in years. Ethan frowned. What's a gateway? It's a device that creates a temporary wormhole, his dad explained. It was designed for long-distance travel between planets. The technology was shelved because it was too unstable, but in theory it could still work. In theory, Ethan repeated. So you're saying this thing could blow up or something? It's a risk, his dad admitted. But it's our best shot at getting Lyra to safety. Lyra nodded, her expression resolute. If there's a chance it will work, we have to try. Staying here is not an option. Ethan hesitated. The idea of using some old, unstable alien tech to send Lyra off-planet sounded insane. But then again, so did everything else that had happened in the last few hours. What about us? He asked finally. If we get her through the gateway, what happens to you and me? His dad's face darkened. We stay behind and cover her escape. Ethan's chest tightened. You're serious. You want me to stay here while alien soldiers are hunting us? We don't have a choice, his dad said firmly. The Dominion won't stop until they believe she's gone. If we draw their attention, it gives her a better chance of making it through. Ethan's instinct was to argue, but one look at his dad's face told him it would be pointless. He glanced at Lyra, who was watching him with a mixture of determination and gratitude. I don't like this, Ethan muttered. Neither do I, his dad said, but it's the only plan we've got. Lyra stepped closer, her voice soft. Thank you, Ethan. I know this is asking a lot, but you're doing something important. Something your father once did for mine. I won't forget it. Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. Fine, let's just get this over with. The journey to the gateway site was tense. They stuck to back roads and wooded paths, avoiding open areas where drones might spot them. Lyra used the cloaking device sparingly, knowing its power supply wouldn't last forever. Ethan's dad drove an old, beat-up truck that looked like it might fall apart at any moment. The vehicle blended in well enough, but Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that every shadow on the road was a threat. How far is this place? He asked after what felt like hours. Another 15 minutes, his dad replied, his eyes scanning the dark horizon. It's in an abandoned research facility. The Dominion won't know about it, but we still need to move fast once we're there. Ethan nodded, his hands clenched into fists on his lap. He'd never felt so powerless. Lyra, sitting beside him in the back seat, placed a hand on his shoulder. You're doing well, she said quietly. I don't feel like it, Ethan muttered. You're still here, she replied. That's enough. Before Ethan could respond, a sharp whine filled the air. Bright lights appeared behind them, growing larger by the second. They'd found us, Lyra said, her voice tense. Mr. Carter floored the gas pedal, the old truck lurching forward with a groan. Hold on, he shouted. Ethan turned to look out the back window and felt his blood run cold. A sleek, black hovercraft was gaining on them, its lights casting an eerie glow over the road. They're closing in, Ethan yelled. Lyra grabbed the cloaking device and activated it, but the field only shimmered weakly before fading out. The power's almost gone, she said grimly. Then we fight, Mr. Carter said, reaching for a small device strapped to the dashboard. He tossed it to Ethan. Use this if they get too close. Point, and press the trigger. Ethan stared at the device, his hands shaking. You want me to shoot at them? Only if you have to, his dad replied. Just buy us time. The hovercraft was almost on them now, its sleek frame bristling with weaponry. Ethan's heart pounded as he gripped the device, sweat slicking his palms. Ethan, now, Lyra shouted. Taking a deep breath, Ethan aimed the device out the window and pressed the trigger. Ethan's finger trembled on the trigger of the alien device. As the hovercraft closed in, the whine of its engines grew louder, rattling the truck windows. Do it, Ethan, Lyra urged, her voice cutting through his fear. He squeezed the trigger. A burst of bright blue energy shot from the device, streaking through the air like a comet. It slammed into the hovercraft with a thunderous crack, causing sparks to explode from its side. The craft swerved violently, barely staying aloft. Ethan felt a rush of adrenaline, his fear momentarily replaced by a surge of hope. "I hit it," he shouted, his voice cracking. "Good shot," his dad yelled from the driver's seat, keeping the truck steady on the winding road. "But they're not down yet. Stay ready." Ethan glanced at Lyra, who had a small, determined smile on her face. "You've got good aim," she said. "Beginner's luck," Ethan muttered, gripping the device tighter. The hovercraft steadied itself, its red lights glowing brighter. With a loud whir, its weapons came online. A barrage of glowing projectiles shot toward the truck, sizzling as they scorched the air. "Hold on," Mr. Carter shouted, swerving the truck sharply. The tires screeched, and the vehicle narrowly avoided the blasts. Ethan was thrown sideways, nearly dropping the alien device. "Are you trying to kill us before they do?" he shouted at his dad. "Not if I can help it," his dad snapped, gripping the wheel tightly. Lyra leaned out the window, her silver hair whipping in the wind. She pulled out a small cylindrical object from her belt and threw it toward the hovercraft. The device exploded midair, releasing a blinding flash of light. The hovercraft faltered, its sensors temporarily scrambled. "Nice one," Ethan said, impressed. "We need to keep moving," Lyra said, climbing back into the truck. "That won't stop them for long." Ethan's dad nodded grimly. "We're almost there. Just hold them off a little longer." The truck barreled down a dirt road, the research facility finally coming into view. It was a massive, crumbling structure with rusted metal walls and shattered windows. "Is this place even safe?" Ethan asked, his voice skeptical. "It's not about safe," his dad said. "It's about what's inside." The hovercraft recovered from the flash and surged forward, closing the gap again. Ethan could see its weapons glowing, ready to fire another barrage. "Ethan, get ready," Lyra said, her voice sharp. Ethan raised the alien device, aiming for the craft's engines. He took a deep breath, steadied his shaking hands, and pulled the trigger. This time, the blast hit dead center. The hovercraft shuddered violently, smoke pouring from its side. It spiraled out of control, veering off the road and crashing into the trees with an earth-shaking thud. Ethan stared, wide-eyed. Did I just do that?" Lyra placed a hand on his shoulder. "You did, and you saved us." "Don't celebrate yet," Mr. Carter warned, pulling the truck to a screeching halt outside the facility. "There could be more coming. We have to move fast." They jumped out of the truck, grabbing the duffel bag of equipment. The facility loomed over them, its metal doors creaking as Mr. Carter forced them open. Inside, the air was damp and heavy, the faint hum of old machinery echoing through the halls. "This way," Mr. Carter said, leading them down a narrow corridor. The walls were lined with consoles covered in dust and cobwebs. Lyra ran her fingers over the alien symbols etched into the surfaces, her expression a mix of nostalgia and urgency. "Will this gateway even work?" Ethan asked, his nerves fraying. "It has to," his dad said, stopping in front of a large, circular platform in the center of the room. The gateway looked ancient and alien, its frame covered in glowing lines that pulsed faintly. A console nearby blinked with faint lights, waiting to be activated. Mr. Carter dropped the duffel bag and began pulling out tools. "Lyra, help me power this up. Ethan, keep watch at the entrance." Ethan hesitated, the alien weapon still in his hands. What if more of them show up? "Then you do what you just did," his dad said without looking up. "You protect us." Ethan swallowed hard and nodded, heading back toward the entrance. The fear in his chest hadn't gone away, but he forced himself to focus. He wasn't going to let anything happen to his dad or Lyra. Behind him, he could hear the faint hum of the gateway growing louder as his dad and Lyra worked to bring it online. "Almost there," Mr. Carter said. "Just a few more minutes." Ethan's heart sank. Minutes felt like a lifetime when you were being hunted. He scanned the dark woods outside, his eyes straining for any sign of movement. Then he saw it. Faint red lights glimmered through the trees, accompanied by the unmistakable hum of more hovercraft. "They're here," Ethan shouted, running back to the room. Mr. Carter looked up, his face grim. "How many?" "Too many," Ethan said, his voice shaking. Lyra stepped forward, her eyes fierce. "We'll hold them off. Just get the gateway ready." "No," Mr. Carter said firmly. "Ethan, take Lyra through the gateway. I'll stay and distract them." "What?" Ethan said, his stomach dropping. "You can't." "I can, and I will," his dad interrupted. "You're more important than me right now. Go." Ethan opened his mouth to argue, but Lyra grabbed his arm. "Ethan, we have to go." "He's right." The gateway flared to life, its glowing lines brightening into a swirling portal of light. Ethan looked at his dad, his chest tightening. "I'll come back for you," he said, his voice breaking. His dad gave him a small, sad smile. "I know you will. Now go." As the red lights of the Dominion soldiers grew closer, Ethan and Lyra stepped onto the platform. The light of the gateway enveloped them, and the world dissolved into a brilliant, blinding flash. Ethan felt like he was falling and floating at the same time. The light from the gateway surrounded him, shifting and swirling in patterns his mind couldn't fully grasp. His stomach churned, and he instinctively grabbed Lyra's arm to steady himself. "Is this normal?" Ethan asked, his voice shaky. "It's a transition field," Lyra replied, her tone calm despite the chaos around them. "The gateway is recalibrating our physical forms for the jump. Just hold on." Ethan wasn't sure how much longer he could hold on. His head spun, and the disorienting light made it impossible to tell how much time had passed. Seconds, minutes. Suddenly, the swirling stopped. Ethan's feet hit solid ground, and the light faded, leaving him blinking in the dim, bluish glow of an alien sky. The air smelled crisp and faintly metallic, and the ground beneath him was smooth, like polished stone. "We made it," Lyra said, stepping forward and scanning the horizon. Ethan looked around, his jaw dropping. They stood on a vast plateau overlooking a sprawling city unlike anything he'd ever seen. Towering spires of glass and metal pierced the sky, connected by glowing bridges that seemed to defy gravity. Strange vehicles zipped through the air, leaving trails of light behind them. "Where are we?" Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lyra's expression softened. "This is Noria, my homeworld." Ethan turned to her, his eyes wide. "This is where you're from." She nodded, a faint smile on her lips. "It's been years since I've seen it. I wasn't sure if I ever would again." Ethan could see the emotion in her eyes, but before he could say anything, a low hum filled the air. Lyra's smile vanished, replaced by a look of alarm. "They followed us," she said, her voice tense. Ethan turned to see a smaller version of the Dominion hovercraft emerging from the glowing portal behind them. It hovered menacingly, its weapons charging. "How did they get through?" Ethan asked, panic rising in his chest. "The gateway must have stayed open long enough for them to lock onto our signal," Lyra said. She pulled out a small device from her belt and activated it. A transparent shield flickered to life around them, just as the hovercraft fired. The blast slammed into the shield, sending ripples of energy through the air. Lyra gritted her teeth, holding the device steady. "This won't hold for long. We need to move." Ethan looked around frantically. "Move where?" "We're on a giant rock." Lyra pointed to a sleek, disc-shaped vehicle parked at the edge of the plateau. "That's our way out." Without another word, they sprinted toward the vehicle, the shield flickering with each hit from the hovercraft. Lyra tossed the shielding device to Ethan as they ran. "Hold this steady," she said. "I'll get the ship ready." Ethan nodded, gripping the device tightly. The energy blasts from the hovercraft grew more intense, and he could feel the shield weakening with each hit. "Hurry," he shouted as Lyra reached the vehicle and began tapping commands into a glowing panel on its side. The ship hummed to life, its sleek surface glowing faintly. Lyra jumped into the pilot's seat and waved at Ethan. "Get in." Ethan didn't hesitate. He bolted toward the ship, diving inside just as the shield gave out. The hovercraft's next blast hit the ground behind him, sending up a shower of sparks. "Hold on," Lyra shouted as the ship lifted off the ground with a smooth, almost effortless motion. Ethan clung to his seat as the vehicle shot forward, leaving the plateau behind. The hovercraft followed, its weapons blazing. "Can't we lose them?" Ethan asked, glancing nervously at the glowing panel in front of him. "I'm trying." Lyra snapped, her fingers flying over the controls. The ship veered sharply, weaving between towering spires as the hovercraft pursued them. Ethan's stomach lurched with every turn, but Lyra seemed completely in control. "They're gaining on us," Ethan said, his voice tight. Lyra frowned, her jaw set. Not for long. She pressed a button, and the ship's engines roared. A burst of speed propelled them forward, and the hovercraft struggled to keep up. Lyra guided the ship into a narrow tunnel that wound through one of the massive spires. The tunnel was barely wide enough for the ship, and Ethan held his breath as they sped through, the walls a blur of glowing lights. Behind them, the hovercraft fired blindly, its shots ricocheting off the tunnel walls. "Almost there," Lyra muttered. The tunnel opened into a massive cavern filled with strange, crystalline formations that pulsed with light. Lyra guided the ship into a hidden alcove, cutting the engines. "Stay quiet," she whispered. Ethan's heart raced as the hovercraft flew past the entrance to the cavern, its searchlights sweeping the area. He held his breath, willing it not to turn back. After a tense few moments, the hum of the hovercraft faded into the distance. Lyra let out a sigh of relief. "I think we lost them," she said, leaning back in her seat. Ethan slumped against the wall of the ship, his body trembling from the adrenaline. "That was way too close." Lyra turned to him, her expression serious. "It's not over yet. The Dominion won't stop until they've captured me. Or worse, we need to find my father. He'll know what to do." Ethan nodded, his fear replaced by determination. "Then let's find him. Together." Lyra offered him a small smile. Together. As the ship powered up again, Ethan stared out at the alien landscape. He had no idea what lay ahead, but one thing was certain: there was no turning back now. Ethan peered out the window as the alien landscape sped past them. Towering crystalline spires shimmered with light, casting vibrant reflections on the ground below. Noria was breathtaking, but Ethan had no time to marvel. The Dominion wasn't far behind, and they were running out of options. "Where exactly is your father?" Ethan asked, gripping the edge of his seat. Lyra tapped a glowing map on the ship's control panel. "He's at a sanctuary hidden deep in the crystalline forest. It's shielded from the Dominion scanners, but getting there won't be easy." Ethan groaned. "Of course it won't." The ship hummed as Lyra guided it lower, skimming just above the treetops. The forest below glowed faintly, its crystalline trees casting shimmering light into the sky. "Why is he hiding there?" Ethan asked, trying to distract himself from the rising tension. Lyra glanced at him. "It's one of the last safe places on Noria. The Dominion's forces can't reach it easily, and the crystals disrupt their technology. My father has been working with others to resist them from the shadows." Ethan nodded. "Sounds like he's our best shot at figuring all this out." Before Lyra could respond, the ship's console beeped, and a red light flashed. "They found us," she said, her voice tense. Ethan's stomach dropped. "Again? How are they doing this?" Lyra's fingers danced across the controls, pulling up a holographic display. A Dominion craft appeared on the screen, closing in fast. "They must have placed a tracker on the ship," she said, cursing under her breath. "Hang on. This is going to get rough." The ship dove sharply, plunging into the forest canopy. Ethan yelped, clutching the seat as branches and shards of crystal scraped against the hull. Lyra maneuvered expertly, weaving through the dense trees. "They're not giving up," Ethan said, glancing back as the Dominion craft appeared, its weapons firing bursts of glowing energy. Lyra gritted her teeth. They won't stop until they have me, or destroy me trying. Not happening, Ethan said, determination hardening his voice. He grabbed the alien weapon Lyra had given him earlier. What can I do to help? Lyra pointed to a secondary console. Activate the ship's countermeasures. The button with the glowing symbol. Ethan scrambled to the console, his hands shaking. He pressed the button, and small drones shot out from the ship's sides. They swarmed toward the Dominion craft, exploding on impact. The blast slowed the craft down, but it didn't stop. Its weapons tore through the drones with ease, and it gained on them again. We need to lose them, Lyra said, her voice tight with urgency. Ethan looked at the glowing crystals outside. You said the crystals disrupt their technology, right? Can we use that? Lyra's eyes lit up. That might work. Hold on. She veered the ship sharply, heading deeper into the forest. The crystalline trees grew denser, their light pulsing rhythmically. Ethan could feel the hum of energy in the air, a strange vibration that seemed to resonate with the ship. The Dominion craft followed, its weapons firing wildly. As it entered the densest part of the forest, its lights flickered, and its engines sputtered. It's working, Ethan shouted. The Dominion craft struggled, its movements erratic. Lyra took the opportunity to activate the ship's weapons. A single precise shot hit the craft's engine, sending it spiraling into the forest below. Ethan let out a shaky breath. Is it over? Lyra didn't relax. For now. But more will come. We need to reach the sanctuary. The ship slowed as they approached a massive crystal formation rising above the forest. It glowed brighter than the others, its light forming a shimmering dome around a hidden structure. We're here, Lyra said, landing the ship near the base of the formation. Ethan stepped out, his legs shaky. The air here was different, thick with energy that buzzed against his skin. This place is incredible, he said, staring at the glowing crystals. Lyra nodded. The sanctuary is built into the heart of the formation. Come on. They approached a hidden entrance, which opened with a soft hum as Lyra waved her hand over a panel. Inside, the air was cool and calm, filled with the soft glow of crystalline walls. A tall figure emerged from the shadows. His silver hair and piercing blue eyes marked him as one of Lyra's kind, but his presence was even more commanding. Lyra, he said, his voice filled with relief. You made it. Father, Lyra said, running to embrace him. Ethan hung back, feeling out of place. Lyra turned and gestured for him to step forward. This is Ethan, she said. He saved me. And he has the artifact. Ethan held up the alien device, feeling awkward under the older man's intense gaze. Lyra's father studied the device, his expression growing serious. So, it's true. The Dominion has started their invasion, and they're after the key to the Nexus. Nexus? Ethan asked, confused. The Nexus is a central energy source, Lyra explained. It powers much of Noria, and could power an entire Dominion fleet if they control it. Ethan's heart sank. So, if they get it, they'll dominate not just Noria, but countless worlds, Lyra's father said grimly. Lyra stepped forward. We need a plan. The Dominion won't stop until they have the key. Her father nodded. Then we must destroy it, or use it against them. Ethan frowned. Use it? How? The older man's eyes gleamed. The Nexus can also disrupt their entire network. If we can access it, we can shut down their forces for good. Ethan exchanged a glance with Lyra. So, we're not just running anymore. We're fighting back. Lyra smiled faintly. Looks like it. Ethan took a deep breath, gripping the alien device tighter. Let's do it. As they began to plan their next move, Ethan felt a strange mix of fear and excitement. He didn't know how the fight would end, but for the first time, he felt ready to face it.